Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining. Today we are actually going to take a miniature break from storytelling and we're going to talk about some informative information. We're going to do some educating. Okay. So what I noticed with a lot of the messages that I've been getting is that they are inquiries about nursing school, and not just how do you get in, what do you need to qualify, but can we talk about the heart? Can we talk about the lungs? Can we talk about this disease? And so what that is now prompting me to do is to now start a series of educational videos. We are not going to step away from the stories. This is going to be in addition to the stories. So for those of you who are here for the stories, do not be alarmed, okay? Do not be discouraged. But also, even for those who aren't in a healthcare or health professional program, some of you have family members that have been diagnosed with some of the diseases that I'm going to talk about. So I'm really happy to be here to offer information. I will say that everything that I'm offering is general information, and it is important to understand that every individual is just that, individual, unique from everybody else. So what I'm talking about might not necessarily apply. Your family member might have a special case or something that doesn't typically happen, or because of their other diseases or other things that they have going on, this disease may present in a different way. So again, what I'm talking about is general textbook information. Okay? All right. So the first topic that we're actually going to talk about, the first unit, is going to be the cardiac unit. And I'm going to go over a series of common diagnoses for the cardiac system. The first disease that I'd like to talk about is atrial fibrillation, also known as Afib. So Afib is known as, or characterized by, the inconsistency of pumping in the atria. So there are 4 chambers, 2 at the top, 2 at the bottom. The top are called atria. So those 2, when you are in the middle of Afib, they're not pumping in accordance. They're not pumping simultaneously or with the rhythm of the ventricles. So instead of it pumping, it's kind of just jiggling while the ventricles are actually doing what they're supposed to do. So there's a lack of communication. And so that leads to blood sort of pooling instead of pumping. So instead of the blood going from the atria to the ventricles, it's just sitting there, and some blood is leaking through. Now, what happens when blood sits in one place for too long? It begins to clot. And that, as a result, puts the patient with Afib at a higher risk for clotting and or a stroke. We're going to talk about strokes later. I don't want to hop all over the place, but for now, understand that Afib can lead to a stroke because of the poor ability for the heart to effectively pump blood. That being said, patients with Afib typically do end up on both a cardiac medication and a blood thinning medication. The purpose of the cardiac medication is to assist with the heart to pump in sync, or to prevent the Afib from progressing to a more lethal rhythm. The blood thinner is to prevent the clot from actually clotting major arteries and then leading to a stroke or a heart attack. With that being said, what are some things that can cause Afib? A number of things, actually. So the most common at least the most discussed, is drug abuse. Now, that does not mean that if a family member of yours has ended up with Afib, they are guaranteed to have had a history of drug abuse. No, that is not what I'm saying. But I am saying that drug abuse is one of the reasons that someone ends up with atrial fibrillation. For example, cocaine is a drug that the heart is very, very sensitive to. Very sensitive. And that could very well lead to the heart slipping into a lethal rhythm for an overuse or even just use, period, of cocaine. Because, you're not supposed to be using it. What's another reason? Being overweight, having a series of other comorbidities, having a history of cardiac diseases, a history of cardiac disease that runs in the family. All of these are risk factors that lead to having atrial fibrillation. Moving forward, atrial fibrillation uncontrolled or not taken care of, unaddressed, can lead to, as I said before, a heart attack and a stroke due to the high potential of the pooling of the blood resulting in clots. Now, I want to go into further detail of what I mean by the pooling of the blood. I like to say that the atria is jiggling and it's not pumping because, again, it's not working with the ventricles to pump the blood. The heart's job is to keep blood moving. Blood is supposed to be consistently moving. When it is not, it clots. So when I say pooling, I mean that instead of the blood actively moving through the heart in the motion in which it is supposed to, it's sitting there because the atria is just jiggling. It's kind of just moving the blood side to side, not moving it in the pattern and in the motion that it's supposed to go. And when, again, blood sits, it clots. So that's what's happening in the atria, in Afib. Atrium, atria. It's not moving. And then some of it is leaking through. Now that's when we can talk about how the clot actually ends up moving and actually ends up being transferred, or why am I slipping on the word? It's on the tip of my tongue. I'm talking about something so complex and I cannot find the word. Transported. Oh my God. Okay, so that clot, as it's sitting in a pooled venous stasis fashion, venous stasis, the blood is sitting. Instead of the blood actually pumping out, it's pooling and then blood leaks. And within that leaking, a clot can then leak out. What ends up leaking out goes into the ventricles. The ventricle is actually pumping. So that the ventricles will then eventually pump that clot that slipped from the atrium out where it's supposed to go, into arteries and or veins. And unfortunately, it could lead to a blockage of a major artery. That would be very unfortunate, something that we do not want to happen. Hence, the reason why it is important to take your medications to prevent that from happening. And again, I know that it sounds like I'm scripted, but there is no medication that completely prevents anything terrible from happening. It just significantly decreases the chances. And you still want that. That's still better than significantly increasing the chances of you getting a clot or a stroke and or a heart attack. There are ways that you can prevent it, but there's no guarantee. Because unfortunately, as I said before, sometimes just having a history in your family of cardiac disease is what puts you at risk for getting a disease such as Afib. So the best that you can do, which is honestly with a lot of other diseases, is live as healthy of a lifestyle as you can. Keeping excessive weight off, because being obese puts pressure on the heart, and that can lead to Afib. Anything that puts excessive pressure on the heart or that leads to the electrical impulses within the heart being out of sync can lead to Afib. Eating appropriately, so foods that do not clog your arteries and as a result puts your heart under pressure to then, work harder than necessary. And then of course working out. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard that athletes' heart rates are lower. And that is because when you think about it, anytime a muscle is worked out, it is stronger. And so therefore, someone who is stronger than me will not have to work as hard to open a jar of jelly or pickles. It's the same thing with the heart. Someone's heart that's functioning significantly better than mine will not have to pump as much to do what my heart is doing. So let's say that a colleague of mine lived primarily a life of an athlete, and their heart rate is 54. That is a low heart rate, but it's normal for them because what their heart will do in one pump, my heart will do in 4 pumps, 4 beats because their heart is in better condition. That does not mean to say that somebody who does have bradycardia, which is a slow heart rate, means that their heart is automatically strong. That is a separate topic, and it does not apply to the example that I just gave. I'm going to go ahead and end that video there. I have the tendency to go off on rants and then eventually end up talking about something that we did not plan to talk about in the first place. Please leave your questions in the comments and I will go through the comments and I will make another video about something that seems to be a topic that is brought up. But in the meantime, I'm going to continue to try to talk about cardiac diseases and then move on to pulmonary and then move on to the central nervous system and so forth. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I hope this was helpful. Also, please go ahead and take a look at that link in my little caption section. Look at all the projects that I'm working on, the music, my other platforms. I did just recently film another video, a StoryTime video, which is a continuation of a story that I started on one of my other social media platforms. So I'm sure that you guys will enjoy that. It's juicy, it's dramatic, okay? So thank you guys so much. Like, subscribe, share. Love you.